this conversation. I think they got it done. Absolutely.
We'll call the meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mishi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Mishi-Saugig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original inhabitants, the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Just so that everyone knows, unfortunately, Warden Burton is not feeling well today, so he's turned the chair over to me, so bear with me. I haven't chaired a county council meeting for a while. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest this morning? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda? Councillor Dayu and Councillor Royale.
That the May 13th, 2026 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. We have two presentations this morning. First up is Michelle Corley from the Human Resources Manager from the City of Kawartha Lakes to talk to us or give us an update on the Gull River Housing Project. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Deputy Warden Danielson and other members of council. I'm here today to give you an update on the KLH Housing Corporation Gull River Housing Project. It's an affordable housing build, as I know most of you are aware. It is going up in construction right now, and most of the framing is completed. It's on Highway 35 near the intersection of Highway 21 in Minden. So it's an exciting build, and it's a beautiful looking site, and it's really coming along. So definitely wanted to circle back to County Council to give some updates on that and also talk about where we're at with projecting rent supplement costs. So just to give some background, that project actually started with some preliminary planning and partnerships back in 2019. And as we know from some of these projects, a lot of time is needed to kind of bring them to fruition. So there was lots of partnership work happening. There was a private individual in the community who, as you know, probably are aware, provided the land and some significant cash contribution towards some of the pre-development planning work. It's a very unique partnership, and we're really excited for him to kind of see his dream come to fruition too. So the project, the Gull River project, which it will have probably another name in the future. Usually a tenant committee is formed and we'll invite tenants to officially name the building. But for now, we do call it the Gull River Housing Project. It is going to consist of 35 one- and two-bedroom units. And all of the units are meeting a general level of accessibility, with 3 of the units going to be have an enhanced level of accessibility, features such as roll under sinks, lowered switches, and things like that to assist people who may be having to live and deal with wheelchairs and things like that in their lives. Of the 35 units over the period of time since 2019, 23 have received significant funding. So we're very grateful that we've been able to provide various pots of funding, direct those funding opportunities that we've received from upper levels of government, as well as other opportunities at our disposal. So with that, when we do have funding tied to specific units, then that sometimes drives affordability decision, things like that. It also drives the rent levels the units have to be at. But overall, we welcome any sort of capital contribution to projects to help, make the debt carrying costs more reasonable, given that rents are usually pretty constrained. So in addition to some of those contributions from other levels of government, I've already mentioned the contribution from the private partner that's at play with this project, as well as various contributions from the County of Haliburton, the City of Kawartha Lakes, and then as well as some other partnerships, waivers of fees and whatnot from Minden Hills. In the report that you'll see in the package, The project itself is totaling about $11.3 million. And then itemized under that section, you'll see all the various contributions of funding. So because of the contributions of funding that have been secured over the last few years, like I mentioned earlier, the rent levels have come down. Previously, when we went to county council in 2021, we were targeting just having 10 units to offer deeply affordable rent geared to income. Because of the additional capital funding that has been attributed to that project, we're now able to have the debt be significantly reduced, and that really reduces the pressure that the rental income is needing to achieve to then carry that debt. So with that, we're able to take almost the exact same amount of previously committed rent supplement funding from the county, which back in 2021 was $72,000 a year. And now because of, like I said, the decrease in debt and the carrying costs with that, we're able to potentially increase the number of deeply affordable units from 10 to 19. With that, we're estimating a modest increase to the previous committed rent supplement amount of $2,000 a year. But keep in mind what is estimated there is what I feel is a pretty reserved or approach to estimating it. I do suspect that the actual cost will be lesser, but I wanted to be transparent because we don't know exactly the incomes of the individuals filling those units. So the cost and estimated cost provided in the report is approximately the worst case scenario. If actual costs do come in lower as we go through our regular operating years, then those costs get reconciled through our cost sharing agreement with the County of Haliburton. Overall, I'll just wrap up by just saying that we're really excited that we're able to now potentially achieve 19 of the 35 units to reach that deeply affordable threshold. We know that there's several hundred individuals waiting for a one-bedroom deeply affordable unit in the County of Haliburton. And then increasingly in that mix of levels of affordability in that project, 7 units are going to be targeted as our new affordable rental rate, and they'll be targeted to individuals who have incomes between the 40th and 60th income percentile. And then there's going to be 9 units that are going to be at a market rent rate. So rates that are going to be higher than the average market rent, but individuals seeking those units, there'll be no income or asset testing associated. So it's going to provide a nice mix of tenure and occupancy options for various people in the community. So with that, just review the recommendation in front of you today. And the recommendation is seeking a small increase from the previously supported $72,000 a year to $74,000 a year. And with that, like I've already mentioned, we're going from 10 deeply affordable units to 19. And then there's also another general recommendation that we will be handling these annual operating costs as we would like other things through the annual budget process that we encounter and enter into with the county. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. It's wonderful to see after all this waiting time to see the project moving ahead so quickly. I actually like the name, so hopefully it'll stay the same, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, any questions from members of council? Comments? Councillor Dayu?
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Could you just remind or clarify, council, in terms of occupant selection, what the process would be for the deeply affordables in particular?
Through the deputy warden to the member. So yes, the occupancy selection, we maintain that centralized waiting list for deeply affordable housing. It is prescribed provincially. We also have to follow any human rights conditions too that apply with rental housing. And so we would be selecting individuals from that list who have specifically selected and are eligible for a 1-bedroom. When applicants choose to apply for deeply affordable units, the application lists all the available units and people select their preferences. So then we are really working with a bunch of subsidiary lists. So we would be pulling that list for individuals who want and need the features of those higher level of accessibility units. Then we will also, we have separate lists for that and separate eligibility determination for that. And then the affordable list too, we're creating that as well. And we're doing some in contesting as well, like I mentioned, to make sure folks are reaching, have incomes between the 40th and the 60th income percentile. Then we also, so really there's almost 4 lists of individuals or 4 lists of folks who will be pulled from the project. Some of the funding contributing towards the project was provincial last mile funding, and that's to support people who are experiencing homelessness. The city also maintains the homelessness by name list. So we'll be selecting individuals experiencing homelessness in the community for some of the units as well. And then finally, for the market rent units, KLH Housing Corporation maintains a market rent list, and they'll pull folks from there.
So no guarantee for Haliburton County residents.
Yeah, we're not limited, we're limited, I should say, right? We can't explicitly screen people for that.
Councillor Rail?
I'll echo that's really great news. I guess my question would be, and everybody's asking, is when do you anticipate first occupancy?
It's looking like it's going to be January. It's an interesting site, as you probably see. Some of the units might be ready a few months earlier, but given that the site's going to be an active construction site for a while yet, realistically, it's looking like January. So in full transparency, there's no rent supplements in the 2026 operating budget that we work on with the county. So we are aiming for 2027 first.
Other questions or comments? Councillor McKechnie?
Yes, so you're saying that there's no percentage at all of those 35, you said there was 35 units?
Yeah.
Are gonna be designated for Haliburton County residents?
We can't designate specifically. Our various legislation mandating our waiting list doesn't allow us, or does the Human Rights Code. But I can tell you last time we looked at the waiting list for the Gull River project for the deeply affordable list, 75% of the folks waiting were from either the city of Kawartha Lakes or the county of Haliburton. Keep in mind that it is funded from various levels of government, and there's also cash contribution from the city of Kawartha Lakes to make it work. But I'm confident, just like our other projects, predominantly they will be folks who are from the region, or there'll be folks potentially moving here and looking to help support the local economy, accepting jobs and things like that.
Maybe I'm being selfish but I just think there's enough people in Haliburton County that could fill it, needless to say, and I'm sure that's what every one of our concerns are here, the people in Haliburton County. So that's the question. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Carter?
Got to relearn each time. The county council has appointed me to the board of the housing corporations. And I was a civilian member, if you will, before that. So I've been involved with this project right from the start. I think there's a couple of things, as Michelle noted, if you see the list of contributions and monies that came to us, and I think in fact the provincial government monies that are totaled there, actually it's from a couple of different pools. And one of those pools comes with rules of what you have to do. I think that, it seems to me around 5 years ago, we did a study of the people that were in the housing units that we had, and it was well over 70% of the people had a link to Haliburton County. In some cases, this is somebody who's living in Coburg now, but grew up here and is moving back home, or they have family here or something like that. So, you know, the lists have rules and, but, you know, it tends to work out in the end. The other thing is that the Housing Corporation did an unbelievable job at pulling this together, as you see when you're talking well over $10 million. The juggling of how the funding came from selling units in Lindsay, so that you could make some money to put into this project and so on. There was an incredible amount of juggling, and I think this is a, you know, and unfortunately, every project is going to be like that from now on. But the point is that this is a good thing, and the fact that we are able to put 9 more units up to being, you know, deeply affordable for $2,000 is, you know, is pretty amazing.
Thank you. Councillor Fury, if you wouldn't mind turning your sound off. I believe our CAO has a question.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. Just quickly, Michelle, just a couple of questions building on some of the comments from members of council. Do you have the data, like kind of the de-aggregated data that shows the relationship between the number of Haliburton County residents that are in the CKL units and then vice versa is how that works out? Do you keep that data, that breakdown?
If we don't have it at our fingertips, it's not difficult to get, so we can do that. I'll also add to that, there's the data on the individuals who are currently waiting for housing units, but then, you know, who ends up filling the units is also different.
Okay.
We find times people who are not from the area, once an offer comes, they kind of understand better the local amenities and things like that, they decline it. But yes, we can provide data on it.
Yeah, so any of the depth that way you just explained it now, I think be extraordinarily helpful for us to understand the process, because I think that's something that's good to know, that there is a process by which they move up on the number of and what is the rate of decline, if you will, for lack of a better term on that. That would be very helpful for us. And just the last part, with respect to the accessibility pieces, just refresh my memory as to the involvement from our accessibility committees had on the program with respect to the amenity features, both internal and external to the facility, would be helpful as well.
I'm not directly part of the construction team and the project management team, so I can't say specifically if there has been connections. I know from prior projects, sometimes if there was another recent project in the region, even the Housing Corporation staff will meet with the tenants, talk about, okay, how have the bathtub fixtures worked? Is there anything we should be reconsidering, you know, or other features of the buildings that should be reconsidered for the next build? I know some of those pieces are done as well. But we also, I think there's also input too from architects and things like that. So I can't fully answer the question about the specific connection.
If I might,
Go ahead.
Well, maybe if you will, Michelle, because you're here, if you can pass that information on to your team with respect to it and have a direct outreach to our accessibility committee to make sure that we have an understanding as to how this is being done and any information they can offer, either currently with the ongoing project, but also for any future projects being built in Haliburton County.
Sure.
Well, thanks for those questions. That'd be good information to receive. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and approve the incremental increase? Councillor McKechnie and Shell.
Second.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Michelle.
That report, County of Haliburton Council, HS 2026-001, Go River Affordable Housing Project Update be received. And further that County Council approve an annual rent supplement contribution of up to $74,000 for the first full year of occupancy 2027 to support 19 deeply affordable housing units, representing an increase of $2,000 from the previous commitment made in 2021 of $72,000 for 10 units. And further, the annual contribution in subsequent years be subject to adjustments through the municipal budget process, recognizing the actual funding requirements may vary based on tenant incomes.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks very much. Next presentation is by Oscar Poloni from KPMG to give us our audited financial statements report for December 31st, 2025. Good morning, Mr. Ploney.
Morning, Madam Chair. Council, thank you very much for allowing. Thank you very much for allowing me. Thank you. The opportunity to be here today. It's always a pleasure to be in front of County Council to present your financial statements and audit reports. So consistent with what we've done in the past, Council, we've put together a bit of a presentation really to highlight the salient points of the audits and the financial statements. So next slide, please. So our audit was completed in accordance with Canadian auditing standards, and these are the rules that govern how auditors undertake financial statement audits. And what you'll notice from our financial audit report is it says that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. And as we've discussed in the past, Council, materiality is the threshold of errors that we're able to absorb before we either require them to be corrected or we change our audit opinion. So for the purposes of the audit of your financial statements for 2025, our materiality was set at $923,000. Now, in the for-profit sector, materiality is typically based on net income, but in the not-for-profit sector, it's generally either revenues or expenses. You can do assets, but we typically don't use assets for municipalities because the size of the infrastructure is so big, it dwarfs the financial statements. So we've calculated our materiality at 3% of prior year's revenues, and this is allowed under our thresholds as well as under our professional standards. Now, as auditors, we use materiality for a number of different purposes. It factors into how we calculate our sample sizes. But what I would suggest, Council, is for your purposes, the most relevant use of materiality is it determines what's known as the posting threshold. And this is the level above which, if we have an error that's not corrected, we have to report it to you today. So the math is 5% of materiality or $45,000. That, Council, is effectively the level of precision that we have from an audit perspective. And I'm very pleased to say that we do not have any errors that are uncorrected above $45,000. So we haven't had to eat into our materiality. So our audit is complete and we are prepared to issue what's known as an unqualified audit opinion. This is the highest level of assurance that you can receive under Canadian auditing standards. And there's really two things that we require. We require counsel to approve the financial statements today, and we require a management representation letter signed by your staff that's basically an attestation telling us they've disclosed all of the information. The audit, counsel, has gone very well. I will tell you, we were done 4 weeks ago. And this, quite frankly, counsel, is due to the work that your team has provided during the course of the year. After last year's audit, they looked for some potential efficiencies that you could drive from an auditing perspective. And because of that, I would suggest to you, counsel, of all the time that we've audited the county, this has been the smoothest year. So I would like to thank Andrea, I would like to thank Tanya, and I would like to thank the other members of the team at the county. This, I know it's kind of weird for auditors to get excited over audits, but the reality is this audit has gone very well. And not that it's a race, council, but of the 12 municipalities that I audit, you're the third one out the door. So for what it's worth. There's no issues that we've identified that we wish to communicate to council. There's no issues from an internal control perspective. We haven't identified any instances of suspected fraud or any contraventions of laws or regulations. So this is pretty much as clean as it gets. So next slide, please. So in terms of the financial statements, the first statement is your statement of financial position. And this is a snapshot of the assets, liabilities, and surplus of the county at December 31st, 2025. So what you'll notice is that the county had just over $14 million of cash and investments at year end. This is down slightly from the prior year where it was $14.4 million. And there's a number of items, council, that will pull this number up or down. So first off, you've had a cash adjusted operating surplus. This is your surplus without depreciation expense of about $7.9 million. Now, on top of that, you've had changes to working capital, specifically accounts receivable and accounts payable, and those have drawn down your cash balances by about $1.7 million. You've paid roughly $800,000 of repayments on long-term debt from a principal perspective. So this is you basically paying down your mortgage. And in addition, you bought around $5.7 million of capital for the year. So when you add these up, there's a slight decrease from a cash and investments perspective. You'll notice that your accounts receivable, which are funds that are earned by the county prior to year end, but received after year end, are up by about $900,000. Your HST is up by about $307,000. So as a municipality, you qualify as what's known as a public service body, or a PSB for HST. So you get all of the federal component back plus a percentage of the provincial component. So there's a rebate there. There's about $250,000 of funding receivable from the Ministry of Health for your ambulance programming. That wasn't there last year, so that brings your accounts receivable up. In addition, there's funding receivable from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs for flood funding under the MISA program. That was about $184,000. And in addition, municipalities are entitled to a rebate for WSIB because there was a surplus. And so you have a rebate receivable of about $132,000. From a liabilities perspective, accounts payable and accrued liabilities, which represent expenses that you incur prior to year end but pay after year end, are up by about $500,000. There's a number of things that go into this. So the amounts that you owe for payroll, which is accrued payroll and remittances up to December 31st, are a bit higher this year compared to last year. That really reflects timing. In addition, the balance that you owe the city of Kawartha Lakes, specifically for human services, your contribution towards them as your service manager, is up on a year-over-year basis. So these two things have brought your numbers up. So what you will find, though, is that there's other things inside your accounts payable that are lower this year compared to last year. Your community paramedicine program is funded based on actual expenditures. To the extent that you don't spend it all, it gets repayable back to the province, but the funding repayable this year was lower than last year. And in addition, last year you had a project on County Road 503 with the County of Peterborough. There was a large payable to them last year for your share of those costs, not present this year. So a bit of the changing, some capital, some payroll, and some with respect to your programming. So just to dig into these numbers in a little bit more detail, next slide, please. The slide that you have in front of you, this is the distribution of your investments. The dark blue bar is the market value. The light yellow bar is your cost value. So, council, a couple of things that you'll find when you look at your investments is this. From an overall perspective, you have an unrealized gain on your investments of about $164,000. So to use the vernacular, you're in the money when it comes to your investments. What you will find, however, council, is that the bulk of your investments are sitting in high interest savings. And these have cost equal to market because that is effectively a GIC. And there's different approaches to investments. I would suggest to you, council, it's not my place to dictate how you invest it, but I would say your investment portfolio really does protect your ratepayers from potential market exposure because the bulk of this is in stuff that's fixed. I can appreciate the market this year has not been easy to watch. From a personal perspective, council, I put my RRSP contribution in 2 weeks before it all disappeared because of stuff that happened. It's all come back, but the reality is as a municipality, investment risk is probably something you may not want to take, recognizing the choice is yours. So you have a very conservative approach, and what that means is you're not subject to market declines, and when you need the money, you can get the money without realizing risks. So next slide, please. This is the same slide in a bit of a different format. This is a multi-year approach, and what you can see is over time your investment balances have increased. What the county has done is you've moved cash out of your bank accounts into your investments to get higher yields. But once again, you've always maintained an approach that I would suggest to you could be characterized as conservative, where you see that you don't have significant fluctuations where your market value falls significantly below cost. So just a bit of perspective on your investments. Next slide, please. Deals with your accounts receivable. So this is a breakout of your accounts receivable by type. The yellow bar is 2025. The dark blue bar is 2024. I just realized, Council, I've reversed the coloring. I will fix that next year. My apologies. I think Councillor Carter, you may have called me on this last year as well. What you will find is that your HST receivable is significantly higher this year compared to last year. This is really a timing of when you do your expenditures, particularly capital. You could see the Ministry of Health funding and the municipal affairs funding that weren't present last year, as is the WSIB rebate. And then once again, other changes that you'll have really depending on timing. So next slide, please. In terms of your accounts payable, this is once again a breakdown of your accounts payable by type. What you can see is that the County of Peterborough accounts payable for that road project was roughly $1.4 million last year. This year it's zero. You can see the City of Kawartha Lakes is higher. Ministry funding, particularly with respect to your community paramedicine program, is lower. And then other changes depending on timing and depending on services. So next slide, please. From a other liabilities perspective, you'll see that the financial statements include deferred revenue, and what this typically represents are grants and other revenue sources that you receive that you haven't spent yet. And you have to spend them in order to earn them. So until such time as you do it, you put it on the books as deferred revenue. There's two primary sources of grants that flow through deferred revenue. There's what's known as the Canada Community Building Fund, which used to be gas tax, and then the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, or OCIF. So this year, your deferred revenue is down by about $420,000. What you've done is in the past, you had deferred OCIF, which you've now taken into revenue this year because you've spent the funds. So that accounts for it. Your gas tax flows through the balances where there's no deferral. In terms of other liabilities, you do have your long-term debt, and this is the value of debt that's been issued by the county. It's come down by about $800,000. These are the principal repayments that you've made during the year that we talked about in your cash. There was no new debt that has been issued in 2025. So there's no increase in debt from an issuance perspective. What you will find is on your debentures, your interest rates will range anywhere from about 1.4% to 4.25%. What you find in time is that some of the older debt has lower interest rates because at the time interest rates were lower. Some of the more recent debt has higher interest rates as well. In addition to the $800,000 of principal that you've paid, you've also spent about $185,000 on long-term debt interest as well. So the final asset is your tangible capital assets at the bottom of the financial statements. And this is the investment that the county has made in your infrastructure. So your roads, your buildings, your fleet, and the like. So this has gone down by about $500,000. So during the year, you purchased $5.73 million of capital additions, which brings this number up. And you've taken amortization expense of $6.2 million in the year, which brings this number down. And County Council, as you know, amortization is you basically expensing your capital over the useful life. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is a summary of your capital addition. So for the information of county council, sorry, we've just summarized additions greater than $100,000 individually. The bulk of your capital spend is with respect to your road network. So this would include road improvements and bridge rehabilitations as well. There's a number of vehicles that have been purchased during the year, predominantly with respect to medical services. In addition, there's the rehabilitation of the county office as well that shows up for the year. So just a bit of description on your capital spend. So next slide, please. So the next slide is your statement of operations, and this is a summary of your revenues and your expenses for the year. Now, Council, as we've discussed in the past, there's some significant differences between how your financial statements are prepared and how you budget. And so I will give you a caution that when you look at your financial statements and you find a surplus or a deficit, you need to interpret that number. So, which we will do as we move through. What you will find, though, is that your total revenues have gone up by about $4 million or 13%. Your municipal requisition accounts for $1.8 million of that. Government grant programs are just under $2 million of that increase as well. In addition, your user fees and service charges are up by about $400,000 on a year-over-year basis. At the same time, your expenses before the contribution for the hospital have gone up by $3.25 million or 10.9%. And we'll talk a little bit about the changes there. But overall, what you'll find is that your revenues have increased at a pace greater than your expenses. And so because of that, you are in a surplus position. Your surplus is $1.6 million. And once again, council, that is your accounting surplus. And that surplus is used to fund capital. It's used to fund principal repayments on long-term debt, and it's used to fund reserve transfers. I know this may sound counterintuitive for your auditor to tell you this, but you really can't rely on that number. And the reason why I say that is if you have a surplus, somebody may say you raised $1.6 million too much in taxes. Council, I want you to know that is not the case. So if you move to the next slide, please. This is a breakdown of your grant revenues, and what you will find is that the most significant grants that the county receives relates to your emergency medical services for land ambulance, as well as your community paramedicine program. And what you will find, council, once again, is both grants are up on a year-over-year basis. And once again, for the community paramedicine program, because the revenue is up, the amount of funding that's repayable at the end of the year is down. And so we talked about that in the accounts payable. You could see your OCIF has gone up significantly. And as we've mentioned, council, last year, there was about 400,000 that was deferred. So this year, you took that 400,000 plus your 2025 allocation. The disaster relief grant, as you can see, second from the bottom, that's the MISA grant. New this year, receivable from the ministry. Other grants generally consistent on a year-over-year basis. Next slide, please. In terms of user fees and service charges, as we've mentioned, these are up on a year-over-year basis. The largest single source that you have from a revenue perspective when it comes to user fees and service charges is recoveries from your local area municipalities. So those are up on a year-over-year basis. Once again, contingent on the types of services and the degree of services that are provided. You can see the WSIB rebate, which is new this year, not present last year. Other user fees, generally consistent. Ambulance fees are down. And once again, this depends on usage. This is very different than what you would see at the local area municipality level because you don't have building permits. You don't have parks and recreation at the county level. So next slide, please. In terms of expenses, consistent with municipalities in general, wages and benefits represent your single largest operating account, and they're about $14 million on a year-over-year basis. Part of this represents an increase in cost in respect to your medical services. So we've talked about how your revenues are up for community medicine and land ambulance. The bulk of those costs are salary related, so these increases for a large part are funded. Other expenses generally consistent on a year-over-year basis. You can see there are some significant transfers to third parties, including the health unit, social services for the city of Kawartha Lakes, and also MPAC as well. Policing is at the lower tier level, and so because of that, there is no allocation to the OPP. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the differences between how you budget and what your financial statements look like. And consistent with what we've done in the past, council, this is a slide that does that reconciliation. So the right-hand column is 2025. So if you look at your statement of operations, you have roughly $1.6 million of surplus on the books. Now, once again, that is an accounting surplus. So the first thing that we've done is we've added back amortization expense because when you budget actual capital expenditures. You don't budget for amortization. So, but your surplus is after $6.2 million of amortization expense. So you add that back. And then what you do is you deduct your capital additions of roughly $5.7 million. In addition, council, as we've mentioned, you've paid almost $800,000 of repayment for debt. In your surplus is only the interest, not the principal repayment. So you have to deduct the principal repayment. When you make these adjustments, what you find is that you actually have a surplus of $1.3 million. Now, of that surplus, council, 1.1 million of that relates to capital. because you are under budget from a capital perspective. And what I would suggest, council, is that is just a matter of timing. You're going to spend that money eventually. So we've adjusted for that to come up with what I would call an operating surplus. Once you do this adjustment, your operating surplus, council, is about $200,000. And I know that's not zero, but that is about 0.6% of your total revenues. And I would suggest to you, council, that is pretty close to break even. What I would also suggest to you, council, is when you look at the history over the last 4 years, that has been your general approach. And as I've mentioned in the past, and at risk of repeating myself, I think this says a couple of things. One is it speaks to the effectiveness of your budgeting process in that you're able to basically come in at near break even. I think it speaks to the caliber of oversight that's provided by your staff in terms of monitoring your financial results, because you don't have big swings. And I will give credit where credit is due. I think this also speaks to the oversight of county council, where you're watching the financial results and you're basically coming in at or near break even. And I would suggest to you, council, this is a good news story, just from my own perspective. So that, council, is a bit of an oversight of the financial statements. Next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of historical analysis, this is a buildup of your revenues and your expenses, and we've adjusted your expenses to take out amortization and to deduct capital expenditures and principal repayments. And what you will see, council, is if you go back even to 2016, you have always operated at very close to break even. So while the municipality has grown from a revenue perspective, what you find is that your results generally have been consistent, where you haven't had big fluctuations with large surpluses or large deficits. Next slide, please. What you will also find is that from a capital perspective, you will have grants consistently from time to time, because the gas tax and the OCIF repeat on an annual basis. You'll also find that you have used debt financing in the past, but generally speaking, you've been able to maintain a fairly significant level of capital expenditures to the tune of somewhere between $3 to $4 million. And what you can see from the graph is the reason why you're able to sustain this is because you've built in a certain degree of capacity for capital financing through your taxation, through your reserves, and through your user fees. And this is good because other municipalities that haven't done that are very much at the whim of when they get grants to be able to undertake capital projects. So from a sustainability perspective, I would suggest to you this is quite positive, because you do have the capacity, whether you get a big grant or not, whether you have to take out a loan or not, to actually undertake needed capital. So next slide, please. Similarly, when you look at your financial position, you can see your cash and investments have grown. You can see that your reserves and reserve funds have moved as well, and there is a gap. Council, I will tell you this. I am going to a municipality tomorrow where these graphs are inverted, where they have more in reserves than they actually have in cash. And the way that you do that is you consistently lose money from an operating basis and you grind your financial resources down. So once again, a positive commentary in terms of your financial position, that you've adequately funded your reserves and your reserve funds. You actually do have the money. So rather than being paper reserves, they're true reserves as well. But as we've discussed in the past, council, in comparison to some of your peers, your reserve balances are low. So to the next slide, please. And I'm not going to belabor this point because you would have seen this from us over a couple of different years, but we've updated our analysis based on financial information returns, the most recent being 2024. And what you will find is, of the counties in Ontario, you actually have the lowest level of reserves. Now, we appreciate you're one of the smallest counties in Ontario. So from an absolute dollar value perspective, we would expect that. But when you move to the next slide, please, what you will see is on a per household basis, your numbers are still the lowest. And so this is a discussion that we've had in the past, council, about the sufficiency of your reserves and what you need for them. And once again, I'm not going to go through all of the detail, but this is on a per household basis. The next slide, please. This is as a percentage of your tangible capital assets. And generally speaking, the reason we look at this is because most reserves are intended for capital purposes, not operating purposes. So your numbers do improve, but what you will notice is you're still towards the bottom half of the comparator group. So next slide, please. We do total revenue as well, just once again to size. And once again, you're towards the lower to mid end of the range. You're definitely not the highest. So if you move to the next slide, please. This is a slide that we've inserted, and it comes from a conversation that we had last year about how reserves are nice, but if you have no reserves and no debt, your financial position isn't necessarily that bad. So what we've done is we've run the comparison on what we call net financial position, which is the amount that you have in reserves less any long-term debt. And what this was specifically intended to address is situations where people have lots in reserves, so they look good, but they have lots in debt, so they really don't have that much. When you run the analysis, council, what you continue to find is that you're on the low end. So once again, I would suggest to you, this really comes down to sufficiency of reserve balances and what you need from a reserve perspective going forward in light of all sorts of stuff that you do. So just to go through the next couple of slides very, very quickly, this is the net financial position on a per household basis. If you go to the next slide, sorry, that's the last one, you'll see it's the same. So Council, one of the other things that we wanted to do, and this really isn't related to the audit, but this is in response to a conversation that we had with your CAO. And really it comes down to affordability. And we had a discussion about some of the certain asks that are coming up. So we just wanted to provide council with our perspectives on affordability. And I will caution council, there's a lot of different ways to talk about affordability. The other comment that I will make, and it's an important comment, is generally speaking, when we talk about affordability, we go based on averages. And the risk that you have when you have averages is there's always people on the outsides. There's people that are significantly higher than the average, where affordability doesn't become an issue. And there's people that are on the bottom of the average, where the average really doesn't reflect their position. So I do want to caveat that as well. But one of the tools that we use when we look at affordability in the municipal sector is we compare income and taxation. And what we would suggest, council, is you want those to match. If you are in a municipality with low levels of income, you want low levels of taxes, because what you want to be able to do is make sure there isn't an affordability issue. If you have higher levels of income, you can get away with higher levels of service, which then drive higher levels of taxation. And there are examples across the province of municipalities that are in this boat. Deep River and Collingwood are two that come to mind. What you don't really want is you don't want to have a mismatch. And so in the case of having lower income and higher taxation, what you then have is you have an affordability gap, because people are paying more pound for pound than what they can afford. And I'll admit this is me sort of channeling your municipal treasurer, but if you're in a municipality where you have high income and low taxation, what I would suggest is you're leaving money on the table. And so that's the opportunity to invest in capital, to invest in programming, and to invest in reserves. So this is the matrix that we typically look at municipalities. So if you move to the next slide, please, this is where you sit. So we've taken the counties in the province of Ontario, we've gone to Statistics Canada, and we found the median income per household. And we've looked at the average residential taxes per household. And what you will find, council, is you are sitting in the lower income, lower taxation quadrant. So what this is this is a recognition that your full-time residents have a lower level of income than some of the other municipalities that are included in the peer grouping. And if you think about some of the counties in Southern Ontario where people are working in Waterloo and living in a county, like there's that type of draw that you have there. What you've been able to do, though, council, is you've been able to balance the taxation levels against the income. So what you have now is you have lower levels of taxes, and that matches your lower level of income. And what I would suggest, council, is this partly reflects what's happened from a reserve perspective, in that you can only go so far before you have affordability issues. And so because of that, the reserve contributions have been a bit lower than your peer grouping. What's interesting, and we've left the names off for a reason, is there's a number of counties that are actually in a disconnect. where there's 3 that we would suggest are probably leaving money on the table, and there's 8 that are having evidence of affordability issues and affordability concerns. So this is important. And once again, when we had the conversation with your CAO and your treasurer, we talked about some of the requests that were coming forward. That has the potential to significantly impact on your taxes, and that has the potential to significantly move you on this grid. So we just wanted to provide you with this, recognizing the caveat that there will always be people that have affordability concerns. The analysis won't capture that. But on the whole, from a systemic perspective, the county actually has done a good job of balancing income levels and taxation levels. And so just to give you a little bit more perspective, on the next slide, please. What you will find is this is actually the distribution of your residential taxes by property. And the reason why I wanted to include this slide, Council, is because we always talk about averages, but it doesn't speak to the actual distribution. So what you will find, Council, is that 56% of residential taxpayers in Haliburton County pay less than $750 a year in county taxes. Now, I want to caution, this is the upper tier component only. It doesn't include the lower tier. There's another 34% that pay between $7,500 and $1,500. So when you think about county taxes, there's 10% of residential taxpayers that pay more than $1,000. And I appreciate people are in different circumstances. But the issue that I have, Council, is I pay more than that for my cell phone. So next slide, please. Recognizing, however, that there's only one taxpayer and there's only one tax bill, this is what happens when you overlay the local taxation as well. And I think from an affordability perspective, it's important to recognize that you can't just act unilaterally at the county table and not expect it to have a compounded effect depending on what happens at the lower area municipalities. But from an overall perspective, roughly a third of residential taxpayers pay less than $1,500 a year in county and local taxes. Another 45% pay between $1,500 and $3,000. And there's 20% of residential taxpayers that pay more than $3,000. And to follow up on my earlier comment, I don't spend $3,000 on my cell phone. So just to give you some perspective of where it is, because once again, Council, if you look at averages, you sometimes lose sight of the distribution. So for what it's worth, we just wanted to provide you a bit of commentary, if you will, on affordability. So, Madam Chair, members of County Council, that concludes our presentation. I'd like to thank you once again for allowing us the opportunity to be of service. I will say it is both a pleasure and a privilege to act as your auditors. Hopefully you found this useful. We'd like to once again express our gratitude to your staff for the assistance provided to us. If there are any questions, more than happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you very much for the detailed and what I would say is a positive report. Much appreciated. I would comment just from my own perspective that I've always been very concerned about the level of reserves that we have here at the county. It's one of my boogaboos, I would say, when we're doing our budget discussions. And, I would urge council to think very carefully about the level of reserves going forward, because we're going to need them. Before I go to questions, I would just like to offer my sincere congratulations and thanks to Andrea and Tanya and our finance team for an excellent job. You've kept us in good order, and for that, we're very grateful. Questions, comments from council? Councillor Ferry. Turn on your mic.
Okay, got it now? Okay now?
Yep.
Okay, it was obvious that the city of Kawartha Lakes was not on your list of with reserves. And maybe you explained that in your later comment that there were 3 or 4 that were, and I don't want to pin them down, but since they were the one that amalgamated 15 years ago and should be in real good financial position, I'm a little shocked that they're on that list. But anyway, I don't expect you to comment on that.
If I may, Madam Chair, so the city of Kawartha Lakes wasn't included in the reserve analysis, and the reason why is they were single tier. And so inside the analysis, we only used counties. So we haven't used any single tier municipalities because they have services you don't. We haven't used any lower tier municipalities because they have services you don't. We also haven't used any regions. So York, Durham, Peel.
I understand that.
Because they have a different distribution of services than you do. So that analysis is purely counties. So the city of Kawartha Lakes was excluded for that exact reason.
Okay, that's a good reason. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Carter?
Well, it's really about the reserves because, you know, when you look at the reserves per household, you know, households are the only people that contribute to our taxes because we don't have that industrial or commercial base. So it gets to be very difficult to say to each of the households out there, oh, by the way, we're going to sock away another $1,000 or $2,000 into a reserve account. You know, you're going to contribute from your household an extra couple of $1,000 for us to hold it in reserves. You know, the situation is obviously you have to project going forward, you know, what you're going to need in capital and so on. But, you know, reserves partly are for the rainy days. And, you know, because we have kept good financial books, we're in a position to borrow for those, you know, very, very quickly for the rainy day situations. So this is a real juggling act, particularly in, you know, our circumstances, which I would submit compared to some of the other people that are on here are very different in terms of our makeup of where our revenues can come from.
Very through you, Madam Chair, very much so. Mayor Carter, what I would suggest is, for what it's worth, to the extent that the county chooses to try to address your reserve sufficiency, you are not going to fix this in a year. You know, there was a mention about amalgamation. When my municipality amalgamated in 2001, as part of their water wastewater program, they implemented a sustainable capital asset management program where they would put away a certain amount over 10 years, specifically designed to grow their contribution to the level where it needed to be. And what that recognized is that Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to fix this issue. I agree with you, Mayor Carter. It is a juggling act, right? And if you were a municipality that uses pay as you go and don't use debt, your reserve position looks very different than if you borrow money. Similarly, where you are from an asset management planning perspective will drive your reserves. What I would suggest, though, is this is probably a 5 to 10 year implementation program to try to get that up. I can ask you for $1,000 today, or I could ask you for $100 a year over 10 years. I'm still going to get to $1,000.
Councillor Royale and then Councillor Daye.
Yeah, I got a terminology. I'd like to say that we're realistically frugal, which is probably where we need to be. And that is, we don't spend what we don't have and we don't spend what we don't need. But at the same time, we try to do the best we can with what we got to make as many people satisfied with the services that we provide. Again, we've got the low income, and that's not going to change. Certainly not going to change in the next few years. And as far as the reserves are concerned, I think that based on what we've been getting back from our staff, we are well forewarned as to when there could be a challenge, and we have adjusted accordingly. Twice we have brought in special reserves to deal with specific issues. So I know we would like to have more reserves, no argument to that, but where does it come from?
Yep.
And I guess my question would be, do you see anything from what you've seen that we are at this point in time going in what could be a bad direction if it did not have realistic advice like we're getting?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would suggest, Councillor, I don't see that. And this is just my own perspective. And I do want to make two things clear. I'm not really trying to be critical of your strategy here. It's just observationally perspective. And second thing is what I say doesn't matter. It's up to council to decide. It's not our place to dictate strategy. What I would say is this: you have not enough in reserves. But to be honest with you, I could say that about anybody. The reserves that you do have, though, are funded. So you do have that capital that's readily available. If you needed $2 million tomorrow, you could get it. The other comment is from a debt capacity perspective, you're nowhere near having exhausted your component. And so if you needed to, for whatever reason, you could go out and you could take out debt if you had to, you're within it. The other comment is, and it gets back to that capital grant with the line and the bars, you have capacity inside your operational budget specifically to be able to deal with capital as well. There's nothing that I would suggest to you causes me a concern that you're going over the cliff. What I would say, though, council, is empirically in comparison to your peers, you're low.
Councillor Dayu. And then Councillor McKechnie.
Thanks again, Oscar. I've always found your presentations to be so informative and, dare I say, so enjoyable. Like I really pull great value from what you present to us.
I hope this is on the internet because I don't think a lot of auditors get that. So thank you.
I do have a process question regarding the metrics of affordability. Where do you draw the income level data from, and how do you know that the seasonal residents' income is accurately reflected in that data source?
So through you, Madam Chair, we use Statistics Canada census information. So admittedly, not the most recent sense of information, but the reason why we use it is because it's consistent. It's consistent across the board. We don't use average income. We use median income. We used to use average income. And then when I was in Deep River, I got stopped by somebody out the door saying, yeah, but if I've got somebody who makes $100 million a year, my average is higher, which is why we've switched to median income. My understanding, council, is that only deals with permanent residents and not seasonal residents. So the issue of people who live in Toronto and potentially come up here, my understanding, and I could be wrong, is they're not included in that number.
If I may just
Go
follow
ahead.
up with that. No, I'm very grateful to hear that, because I think given the demographics of our county, and in particular a couple of our townships, such as Algonquin Highlands, where the majority of our taxpayers are seasonal, it would be interesting to see, how can we get granular, either here within the county or using some form of statistics that are coming in from afar, but how can we get granular on that seasonality? Because we do have a considerable difference, I assume, in income level between most of our permanent residents and a good chunk of our seasonal residents. And I think that's got to be brought into the metrics in some way, but it's hard to know where we would collect that data from.
Through you, Madam Chair, I know Canada Revenue Agency used to disclose information from tax returns on a geographic level. I haven't looked. We use the census data. I'd have to think about it, to be honest with you. The one comment that I would make about non-seasonal residents, one of the things that I've discovered over time is what you find is there's multi-generational transfers of recreational properties. And so what that means is the person who may be inheriting the house on the lake is a school teacher. And so because of that concept that they're all multimillionaires may not actually hold true. My other experience, though, to your point, Councillor, is this: the permanent residents in municipalities that have large seasonal populations typically don't earn as much as the seasonal residents. And so you can't use averages, and you can't leave them behind, is the comment I would make. It's a valid point.
Councillor McKechnie.
You talk a lot about reserves, sir, and I'm just curious, and maybe you can't answer this question, or maybe you can give us a ballpark idea. Like, how far below the amount of reserves are we down right now? Would you consider?
I will look it up, Counselor.
Okay.
So on a, through you, Madam Chair, on a per household basis, the average reserve balance in 2024 was $1,855 per household. Your reserve balance was 460. So in order to get to the average of the counties, you need 4 times the level of reserves that you have now. So to or to Mayor Carter's point earlier, to get to average, the ask would be $1,200 a house. Recognizing, if you think about that tax distribution, most of your taxpayers don't pay that much in upper tier taxes. So it will take you time to get there, but that, Counselor, is basically the delta to where you are on average. And that then assumes that the average is enough.
It's quite obvious that during our next budget discussions or the next council's budget discussions, that they need to have a serious conversation about reserves. And everybody has a little bit of a different perspective on where we should stand. Councillor Fury and then Councillor Carter. You put on your, have you got your mic on there, Murray?
I don't know what's doing it by itself now. It's pretty smart.
There you go.
You showed a chart there what the county's portion was on the residential taxes, but I don't know that you included the seasonal residents in that, because that seems awful low to me for what our waterfront people are paying.
Through you, Madam Chair, this is all residential properties. It excludes vacant lots.
So that's something we have to deal with, because almost half of our taxpayers are waterfront owners and they're cottagers.
To your point,
they pay taxes too.
To your point, Counselor, it does include the waterfront properties.
It does, but
Yeah.
that's not resident, and they're residential.
They are, yes.
Okay.
Just for the information of council, your staff provided us with information obtained from a tool called Opta, which has every tax property in the municipality. No names. And so what we did was we sorted specifically for residential properties. We took out any vacant lots, for example, or anything that were low, because at the end of the day, we were more interested in houses than lots.
Councillor Carter, then Councillor Ryan.
So first of all, I think our reserves are low. Okay, I'm not, but again, when you look at the average, it's a little bit like your previous example. A lot of those people have higher reserves because they provide levels of services and that we do not, such as perhaps wastewater and I don't know what else they might.
Through you, Madam Chair, the reason we picked counties is because the distribution in counties is all the same. No counties provide wastewater.
Okay.
No county. But to your point, though, Mayor Carter, I think when you look at service levels, what it looks like in Simcoe County may be different than what it looks like in Haliburton County. I will say that.
Long-term care, a lot of different things that might.
Yep.
Councillor Rael.
I think too, the makeup of our population, even when you're looking at the seasonal group, because again, like Algonquin Highlands, Highlands East has a large percentage of seasonal people. And over the few years that this has been a real issue, the composition of seasonal and the definition of seasonal has changed significantly. One, you have much more semi-retired people. What does that do? That leaves them here more often. You have multi-generational people, which means that at the end of the day, there are more people coming up here from the larger family and occupying time, space, and using our resources. So the idea of having a seasonal period that was roughly 12 weeks in the summer, composing predominantly of Saturday and Sunday, is basically gone. Now there's people in seasonal cottages virtually 7 days a week for the most part, because if it's not one part of the family, it'll be some other. And the 12 weeks is now expanded to at least 16 to 20 weeks. The bad news is they're not paying any more taxes. They're doing exactly what they did before financially in a contribution. However, it is costing us more money now to service that particular level. So our operating costs are going to be reflecting an increase. And going back to the reserve issue and back to the amount of money that we actually can collect, it puts us in a bad spot again to try to raise our reserves, because technically, as Councillor Carter said, it's rainy day money. And so therefore, when you're trying to argue that your taxes are going up because we might need it tomorrow, it's true. No, you can't take that away from it. But it's also a problem because people are asking, well, you don't need it right now. And so I'm not sure what the solution is there. If you know of one, I certainly would like to hear it.
Through you, Madam Chair, this
I just
is,
want to argue the fact that I don't see it as rainy day money. It's money that we're going to need very much in the future. Sorry, go ahead, Oscar.
well, through you, Madam Chair, and it's an encouraging discussion to have, and it's very clearly there's a lot of things, and I'm not trying to be facetious when I say this is one of the reasons I will never run for council.
Smart man. Any other comments or questions? Well, once again, thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I'd like a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation and approve the audited financial statements. Councillor Shell and Councillor Dayu.
The presentation from Oscar Poloni of KPMG regarding the audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2025 be received. And further, that the 2025 audited financial statements be approved as presented.
All in favor? That's carried.
I recognize this is an election year. I'm not sure what everybody's plans are. I don't know what the future holds. I do, though, want to take the opportunity to tell you how very much I've enjoyed working with you. So
Thank you so much.
These have always been very interesting conversations. I will tell you, I very much enjoy coming down here for this. So
Well, hopefully they'll continue to be very interesting
we'll
conversations.
see. For what it's worth, your library is doing really well, but that's this afternoon. So
Thanks again.
thank you very much.
So we have no delegations. I wonder if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the consent agenda. Councillor Dayu and Councillor McKechnie.
That the items listed under the heading consent agenda for May 13th, 2026 be adopted as presented.
All in favor? That's carried.
I'll take a break.
If we could take a 15-minute break. Come back at 10:30. Okay. Welcome back to the meeting. Next up under finance is the financial report as of March 31st of this year.
Hey, good morning. Overall, as of March 31st, the county had collected 22% of its budgeted revenues, 26% of operating expenses were incurred, and almost 5% of capital expenditures incurred. I did provide explanation within my report for areas that may seem to be trending over the 25% Q1 expectation, but are not due to timing of payments. Some examples of these would be biannual payment schedules for our long-term debt, annual membership or subscription fees that are typically due in January. All annual physician incentives have been paid for the year, along with expensing our annual vacation entitlements in January. A few specific areas to bring to council's attention that are trending slightly over budget as of Q1: vehicle fuel, and vehicle repair parts, heat and hydro, along with winter maintenance, wage and benefit lines, which I think are all due for course with the winter that we had. So we will continue to monitor these, report back to council as necessary throughout the year. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Councillor Carter.
Yeah, just on obviously winter maintenance and things, and perhaps even spring maintenance of fixing the things that broke over the last month or so. So if we remain above budget for the year because, you know, we've been hit with what we've been hit with, and where does the money come from to make that up? I would suggest that it not necessarily come from reserves, but rather come from any surplus that we might have from anywhere in the county, because it's kind of a luck of the draw type of thing.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Through you, Deputy Warden. Yes, that year, and we'll continue to report quarterly, so council is aware of where we're at and where we're tracking. But with the Q4 year-end report, it would be staff's recommendation that we cover it within any overages or surpluses throughout the approved budget before we would be recommending it be funded from reserve.
Good.
Councillor Royale.
Yeah, we were talking about things that are totally not in your control. The price of fuel is definitely not. And it looks like it's going to be that way for the rest of 2026, and who knows what's going to happen after that. We're certainly going to go over budget. That I can't see us not doing. Are you comfortable with where we? I know you're not comfortable with where we are, but have you got contingency plans for how we can deal with that specific issue itself?
Again, I think staff will just continue to monitor it as we go throughout the year. As we finish doing our tenders and RFPs and learning where we come in within budget there, I know Sil has already seen some savings with some of his tenders that have come in. So those are some areas where we can adjust budgets to offset some of those extra expenditures.
So that would be some area, like for instance, if we had an extra $10,000, just throwing a number out there, we could transfer that to fuel consumption and try to bring that down a touch.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Councillor Furious can disconnect. We're trying to track him down.
Could I have a, excuse me, a mover and a seconder to receive and approve the financial report? Councillor Dayu and Councillor Carter.
That report number COR 10/2026 Q1 financial report, including year-to-date actionals as of March 31st, 2026, be approved as presented.
All in favor? That's carried. Is he okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, by the way.
That's kind of mean. Go true. Okay, we'll just give it a minute. Bear with us. We're just having some technical arrangements to make. I will call the meeting back to order, and apologies to those who are tuned in for the slight delay. Next up on the agenda are some changes to the Public Sector Procurement Act. So over to Ms. Rosenberg.
Good morning, Deputy Warden, members of council. Yes, the Buy Ontario Act came into effect in December of 2025. Following that, the Municipal Buy Ontario Procurement Directive came into effect on April 13th, which included passenger fleet vehicles. And on May 15th, the capital infrastructure procurements will now be covered under that directive. So fleet vehicles include light duty passenger vehicles, but what is out of scope right now of the directive are ambulances, modified specialty vehicles, emergency response vehicles, and vehicles over a gross vehicle weight rating of 4,500 kilograms. They are not in scope. For capital infrastructure, it includes construction, reconstruction, renovation, major fixtures, furniture, and equipment to support facility readiness and fleet transit vehicles. So items like medical supplies, information technology, operational fixtures, furniture, and equipment after a facility is operational, and routine maintenance and repair are out of scope of capital. So the Act specifies thresholds for capital infrastructure projects, being construction under 347,000 and goods and services under 139,000. This threshold will have a 10% evaluation advantage to the bidder with the highest Ontario proportion, followed by Canadian such. For projects that are over 347,000 and goods and services over 139,000, they will have a domestic supply chain plan component to it, where the vendors will have to identify their supply chain, and that will be weighted at 10% for procurements. So to ensure compliance with the Buy Ontario Act and the municipal directive, staff are recommending the attached amendments to the procurement policy, and staff are currently working on updating our templates and procurement documents to ensure we are compliant and apply the required evaluation criteria and the weighted domestic supply chain where applicable in our procurements. So staff have attended several webinars with Supply Ontario, the Ontario Public Buyers Association, to keep on top of what is required with this municipal directive. So if you have
Thank you.
any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Carter.
So, I'm sure this is going to make your life a lot more complicated, but, so, yeah, and I don't want to talk about specifics, but the next thing on the agenda is the West Guildford Bridge. And so there was a whole analysis done there of who should win and so on and so forth. And I don't want to talk about any specifics, but have you, if you had to do that project or other similar projects with these new rules, you know, how much more complicated is that going to be? And sort of the second part is, so, you know, a bridge, for instance, may have a lot of steel in it. And the steel could come from, you know, from DeFasco in Hamilton, or it could come from China. Which would then seem to imply that you've got to apply certain 10% premium on it or something like that. So how much more difficult is it going to be for you to do these projects?
I believe it's going to be a substantial amount of work getting it set up. A lot more detailed information will have to be known about the projects that are coming up. So we can look at the supply chain, but it's going to be a lot more work for the vendors as well, because they are the ones that are going to have to produce that domestic supply chain plan for the major components and or goods and services of the project. So it's going to be quite a bit more work.
Go ahead.
I guess my follow-up then would be, you know, on a large project, fine, people are gonna want to do the work. But if I have say a project that's the minimum here, the 347,000, and I've got components, all sorts of components that, the guardrails, the plates, all these things, are people actually going to bid? Are they gonna do all that work and actually put in bids for us?
That's a risk. Now, the province has identified different methods of evaluation depending on the type of procurement that you're doing and what might best suit that procurement. So we are reviewing all the methods. So we are going to try to determine which method will work best for the procurements for us and for the suppliers to reduce that.
Councillor Rao.
Do you think that this is going to have any impact on the renovations that we're doing over in Minden with regards to the buildings that we have over there?
No, it does not.
Not at all.
No, any procurements that have already been issued or awarded does not apply in the directive, or any contract extensions that come up, this directive does not affect.
I gather there would have been cost reductions for us if that would have been possible, which unfortunately it can't be. So I guess it's mute.
Was that a question or a comment?
Probably more of a comment because I don't think the answer is doable.
Any other questions or comments? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and approve the amendment? Councillor Carter, Councillor Rao.
That Haliburton County Council approve the County of Haliburton Procurement Policy FN 04 as amended to reflect the changes to the Buy Ontario Act and Municipal Buy Ontario Procurement Directive.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Tanya. Next up is Public Works and approving an award for the Guildford Bridge, West Guildford Bridge. Good morning.
Morning, Deputy Warden Danielson and members of council. Today's report is for the awarding of the West Guildford Bridge Rehabilitation Project. The tender closed on the 30th of April with 9 bids being submitted. The bridge was identified for rehabilitation in 2026, and the general scope of work includes stage construction. So we'll do one side of the bridge at a time, and we'll have temporary traffic signals as well to take care of the traffic volumes and traffic flows. Scarifying of the bridge deck, concrete removals, placement of new expansion joint parapet and ballast walls, and as well as deck curbs. The placement of concrete overlay and steel beams, and as well as the supply of hot mix surface as well to finish the project. This rehabilitation will extend the expected service life by approximately 40 years. The bids were evaluated and KB Civil Contractors, Inc. Was low bid and have completed a previous similar job last year on the Potash Lake Bridge, which was quite successful. The allocated budget was $800,000, where the bid price came in at $638,000, including non-recoverable tax, and provides a saving of $161,000. Staff are recommending the award to KB Civil Contractors, Inc., and that the savings would cover the design costs of the County Road 9 McGillivray culvert design for 26, and then construction in 27, which is outlined in our capital program, our asset management as well. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Good to see the level of interest and the savings realized. Questions or comments? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to approve or award the contract? Councilors Carter and McKechnie.
The staff report, PWS 07-2026, the 2026 West Guilford Bridge Rehabilitation Project tender be approved, and further that the warden and clerk be authorized to enter an agreement with KB Civil Contractors, Inc. for the completion of the identified work.
All in favor? That's carried.
I have one more note, Deputy Warden. This morning, we were made aware of a washout on the rail trail, so we had to close it from Cemetery Road to Milburn Road. And we're presently investigating the cause of the washout. I think Minden Hills is also involved in this one. So just to let you know.
Thanks for the heads up. Much appreciated. Any comments or questions on that?
Just a comment is that we need better relationships with the Beaver community.
We've talked about that before. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Next up is planning. And a report on establishing municipal service corporations for communal services. Good morning.
Good morning, Deputy Warden Danielson, members of County Council. Council will recall a whole month ago, we had a lively discussion about communal servicing for housing affordability and that kind of thing in Haliburton County. There were a lot of questions about municipal service corporations that came out of that. And it was County Council's directive that we bring forward a report about MSCs and their use case for communal services in Haliburton County. I've provided a report that sort of provides kind of an overview and sort of a question and answer sort of perspective on MSCs. I won't go through that line by line, but I will just provide a little bit of information in general about kind of the use case for communal services specifically. So MSCs are permitted under section 2031 of the Municipal Act, or pardon me, municipal service corporations, are permitted under section 2031 of the Municipal Act, subject to any prescribed regulation. That prescribed regulation is OREG 59906 under the Municipal Act, and that creates kind of the guardrails for an MSC for municipalities. So MSCs can provide any service that a municipality can, subject to certain limitations, and they've become really popular for public utilities like water and wastewater. And in Eastern Ontario in particular, Frontenac County is kind of a leader in looking at using this for communal servicing. So a couple of notes in terms of sort of the kind of the information you need when you're looking at it for a communal service. Where an MSC is providing a public utility, so drinking water or wastewater, that MSC has to be wholly municipally owned. So you can't have any private parties. You can have multiple municipalities. You can also have partnerships with the Crown, whether that's federal or provincial. But that utility itself has to stay in the hands of the municipalities that it's servicing. The MSC can also work in other municipalities, but you have to have the consent of those municipalities. So, you know, if Dysart and Minden decided to have an MSC, they could provide services in Highlands East, provided Highlands East Council, you know, consented to that, for example. An MSC is a corporation, so there's multiple ways to incorporate them. The two main being the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporation Act, which is what our current MSC for the tourism for Haliburton County is under. It's a not-for-profit corporation, one voting member, that being the County of Haliburton. The other model, which is more common for utilities, is like a share capital for-profit corporation under the Ontario Business Corporation Act. That's what they have used in Frontenac County. And I'll give a little overview of kind of why they chose to do that and the perspective they used there. There's a benefit in terms of using MSCs for drinking water and wastewater for a couple of reasons. So one of the big ones is that you can appoint a board that essentially has their job is just to manage that utility and to manage that utility well. And because the corporation can be set up to be sort of arm's length from the municipality, if it's structured as a government business enterprise or a GBE, it does not impact the sort of the annual debt repayment limit of the local municipality, which would allow that corporation to take on debt potentially for capital expenditures and expansions, and then also sort of leave space for the local municipality to have that space to be able to fund our other many various capital expenditures as well. On the flip side of that, and I'm not a treasurer, but the annual repayment limit is calculated based upon revenues, which can include user fees from systems. So if you were to take existing systems and put it in the MSC, for example, you would lose the user fees associated with that. And so that could have an impact on a municipality's debt repayment limit. So it's just, you'd have to make a calculation, on a sort of what would be the best sort of tool to use there. MSCs, because they're wholly owned by the municipalities for public utilities, they are not subject to the restrictions on bonusing under Section 106 of the Municipal Act. So the OREG actually expressively permits municipalities to give or lend money, give or sell property, guarantee borrowing, or provide services for employees or contractors of the municipality. This is something that's kind of unique to MSCs because you typically would not be in a position to provide that to another kind of third-party private corporation. And we've talked about this at the county council table with regard to the tourism corporation. There are 3 requirements under the OREG to establish an MSC. The first is you have to do a business case study. The municipalities that are taking part have to have an asset to corporation transfer policy, and you have to undertake a public consultation. That was something the county of Haliburton did as part of their tourism kind of project, and any MSC for any purpose requires that step. Municipalities, when you're looking at infrastructure stuff like communal servicing, or even bringing existing assets like water and wastewater into a corporation that you would be sharing, typically you'll want to do like a needs assessment or a feasibility study before you do those things as well, to kind of look at, what the benefits would be to what parties. And then if you are going to have a share capital corporation, so a for-profit corporation, if you have multiple shareholders, you're going to typically have a shareholder agreement about sort of how voting works, if someone wants in, if someone wants out, if there are profits from this corporation, how are they, sped out, that kind of thing. And then the other benefit is when we're running an MSC, you can appoint a board of directors. Because it's a wholly owned by the shareholders, they can have a structure that they see fit. I mean, it is just a corporation. Best practices sort of that we've seen from AMO and that kind of thing is that typically, if you're going to have a sort of a technical corporation, you would hopefully appoint some directors who have technical expertise or knowledge that they could bring to the table. That can also have the benefit of alleviating sort of yet another meeting that councillors or mayors or things like that have to go to. And I think Scott provided lots of overview with this in terms of the tourism corporation, but typically you would be going sort of on a regular basis to the councils that are constituent parts. You would have a budgetary process, that kind of thing, not dissimilar to like the library board. One of the benefits for using an MSC for joint for communal servicing across the county, it allows you to sort of spread out expertise, sharing resources, sharing staffing, also sharing risk if you're looking at sort of a new venture, as opposed to 4 municipalities having to come up with sort of 4 sets of staff, 4 sets of contractors or operators, things like that. Again, it allows council to delegate authority for stuff like water rates, sewer rates, things like that to a trusted sort of third party that answers to council. It also, if you're using an MSC to manage a communal system specifically, because it is in the eyes of the Ministry of Environment, a publicly maintained utility, we're no longer dealing with things like the municipal responsibility agreements, like we were talking about last time, where, if a private system were to fail, you sign an agreement saying that maybe we'll take a surety, but we have to sort of take the ownership or the maintenance of that. It also reduces costs and builds some predictability for developers in the development sector. So, you know, I'll mention sort of briefly what they do in Frontenac, but across the county, there's sort of a single set of standards for what these communal systems look like. And it creates some predictability about sort of what the costs are. And then you're not sort of stuck holding the bag in the end, having to continue to maintain that system in perpetuity as well. Always a risk with any sort of venture. Again, we mentioned sort of and touched on it, moving sort of revenue sources from the municipality into a corporation can have an impact on your annual debt repayment limits. Municipalities receive really favorable lending sort of terms. MSCs, being a public utility, don't always get exactly the same types of lending terms, you know, if you're looking to do a capital project. And then because you're operating with a board of directors versus being sort of a department under council, you want to make sure that your board of directors and your council are strategically aligned in terms of, you know, they're focused on what's good for the utility. Council is often concerned about what's good for the whole municipality. There could be some, you know, some areas of friction there. But if it's set up properly, there's lots of ways to mitigate that. So just briefly, in Frontenac County, they have created the Frontenac Municipal Services Corporation, or the FMS. It's a joint venture between the 4 local municipalities in the county of Frontenac. It's a share corporation, so it's a for-profit venture. Each local municipality owns a share and are voting shareholders. The county holds a 20% stake and is a non-voting shareholder. This is because counties cannot provide drinking water services under the Municipal Act unless you do the transfer of powers. And the purpose here is to act as a service provider for communal drinking water and wastewater systems. So there is an existing system in Sydenham that is maintained by Utilities Kingston for them. That's kind of separate from this. This is solely focused on communal servicing in their case. So their board is elected members from local municipalities. They have a technical advisory committee that they recruit for that provides advice and expertise to that directory, that sort of board of directors. And then their job at the MSC is twofold. So they're building technical guidelines, design and assumption standards, sewer and water use bylaws, all these kinds, sort of the apparatus that you would typically have at a municipality to connect to services or to build out infrastructure to connect to services. And then they're also would be responsible for reviewing system designs and sort of accepting them for assumption. They're working with Clearford Waterworks on this. Clearford's a well-known name in the water and wastewater game in Ontario and internationally. And it's a similar approach to sort of traditional servicing. So if you had a subdivision where you're going to be plugging into the existing system, you would have to install all of those sewer lines and mains and pumping stations and things like that to a municipal standard. They would then be reviewed by the municipality and assumed for maintenance. You'd be looking at a very similar type of setup here with a communal system. Again, for them, this reduces the need for the sort of MRAs, and these systems are on a user pay basis. So they have sewer and water bylaws, they're metered usage. The real benefit here that for FMS is it's more desirable for developers. It creates a clear standard across the county. Frontenac County is big and sparsely populated, similarly to ours, with 4 local municipalities, and they've all agreed to sort of have a single set of standards here. It shares those resources and the risk. So in Frontenac, a little different than us, South Frontenac has like 70% of the population, and the other 3 municipalities are quite a bit smaller. So it kind of shares the wealth in terms of the information and the knowledge and that kind of thing. And this is kind of a template that our municipalities could look at if they were interested in taking this route. You could go just communal services, sort of as similarly to what they're doing in Frontenac. You could use it for all water and wastewater if you had existing systems you wanted to put into it. MSCs are very flexible and can be used kind of for the needs of the municipality that's using it, right? So in terms of next steps, if your councils are kind of interested in this, myself and Elizabeth are pleased to talk about MSCs and communal servicing to your local councils and have those discussions if you'd like. There are resources. So EORN working together with a consultancy called 2B, I think it's 2B Developments, and I think they're out of Eastern Ontario. They work together under a joint venture called Rural Impact Canada. their job is to sort of work with municipalities to build out MSCs for communal private systems. Frontenac Municipal Services are happy to meet with and talk about and share their model with other municipalities as well. So we could certainly reach out there. Yeah, so, and if there is any kind of appetite for a joint venture for an MSC, local municipalities would need to talk about sort of aligning their official plan servicing policies around those sorts of things. And as always, county planning staff are pleased to assist and help in any way we can with that. So yeah, that's kind of the high level review. Happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Thanks, Kim. Questions from council? Councillor Carter.
So number of questions, but they should be quick, hopefully. So you said that, the township would need some sort of a bylaw to do asset transfer. If it's all new though, would you still need that?
I believe you do still have to have a policy in case there were municipal, like say there was a piece of municipal land that you were going to transfer to the MSC for use for the utility, that kind of thing. So the policy has to exist even if you're not moving stuff yet.
Okay, fair. So when we're talking about water, wastewater, you've got the pipes in the ground and so on. Explain to me, who would own the pipes?
So typically, my understanding is the MSC would own the pipes.
Okay.
And it would be through like an easement. So if say you've got a municipal street,
Like Bell's
yeah,
telephone.
exactly. Or, like Utilities Kingston, and Kingston is a public utility. It's owned by the city of Kingston, but they own it subject to an easement over the township street.
Okay, and you talked about borrowing. Obviously, we have IO that we can borrow from. Are you suggesting that they would not be able to get IO money, or is that something that's being looked at?
I'm not suggesting that they couldn't. I think it would depend sort of specifically on the project, because I know municipalities can guarantee and back the borrowing for the MSCs. I am not a municipal treasurer. What I can say in terms of sort of private sector borrowing, like if you were going for like, bank loans or things like that. One of the notes from the Municipal Financial Officers Association was that sometimes these utility corporations are not seen to be at sort of the same level in terms of borrowing as a municipality would be.
Okay, and last one. So if you were to have, I think like Frontenac, they have certainly multiple projects that are water, wastewater in different areas. And so they would fall under one organization. What if you then decided, or you had a situation where you could do, say, centralized heating for a subdivision? Would you set up another organization, or could this one organization be able to handle different types of projects or different types of business units or something like that?
I think in terms of sort of the articles of incorporation need to be very clear about the sort of the use that you're providing to it. However, you can amend the articles of incorporation for a share corp. So certainly you could probably broaden it. It could also be a matter of sort of setting up a subsidiary that holds sort of that stuff as well. So, I mean, really, other than sort of the very specific, it's got to be a thing municipalities do and it falls within some of those guidelines, they can mostly do anything another corporation does, subject to making sure we're kind of following that OREG and generally accepted municipal practices.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Rail.
Yeah, obviously I've been an advocate of finding out more about this than we can do. It's a multi-year project. This is for sure. So it's not something that this particular council is going to make any decision on. That has to happen in the new council coming forward. Got that too. However, similar to what we're doing in other areas, I think it's something that possibly we could come up with a report that would be ready for an incoming council to look at to determine whether or not it would be viable or not viable. Again, things looking at where are we going with consolidated services is something that should be controlled at a more county-wide project. I can't see it intelligently be done by individual municipalities. One, it doesn't cover a whole lot of territory, and two, I don't think individually we could afford it. So that would be kind of something that I would look at. But at the same time, we obviously have identified that there are certain advantages into what is incorporated into this thing. An example could be the services that are already existing in Minden and in Cardiff. It may not be advantageous to bring those in because they may be money available to them that may or may not be available to a new corporation. So Mike, I guess what I'm asking, is it possible, not by July 31st, because that would be like all wrong, but before the end of our term, to have some kind of a report that would just lay out the facts, just the basic ideas, either costs if they're available, or areas that have to be costed, areas that would require modification in how we handle business, be it bylaws, be it official plans, and so on and so forth. It's a big ask, but at the end of the day, I'm concerned that if we wait for the new council to come in without any information provided to them, it's going to take a year to just figure out what direction we could go in. Whereas over the next little while, at least we could come up with some kind of a preliminary report that would see if the new council would have a flavor and an appetite for pursuing it. Is that possible?
So through the deputy warden to the counselor, I'm not sure how useful, how much information we could incorporate into kind of a single report for a next council, because things are so open as it stands right now. I think, and maybe our CAO would have some further comments. I think there would be a real benefit to just having a quick chat with each of the municipalities to let them know about this information. I mean, I'm certainly, they can watch the meeting too, but we're happy to sort of present sort of a combo of sort of those two reports and, in a truncated to see if there's kind of an appetite for it across the four. And that's where sort of like the feasibility and stuff like that comes into play. And Frontenac, I know what they did was they sort of went and got kind of an expression of interest from everybody. And then thankfully, because they've gone through all of those processes, if we were to be able to talk to EORN or to FMS, that kind of thing, they could probably provide us with a little bit of sort of, here's the Coles Notes process we had to go through to get there. We could certainly provide more information on that, but sort of outside of kind of knowing if there's an appetite for everybody to take part in it, would it include all water and wastewater or just sort of communal services, which is what Frontenac did? The kind of the smaller the scope, the easier it is to provide the information. When it's sort of a really broad sort of, what do we do with services conversation, that's probably not something that would be sort of living specifically in the planning department, because I would say that my friends in infrastructure know a lot more about some of those things than I do, and our treasurers and our CAOs. Happy to bring back more information if needed, happy to talk to your councils if needed. We would just need more direction specifically, I think, about what you would want us to provide to a new council. Happy to do it. We're this far in, we're happy to go find more information if needed. I would just want to make sure that we had a good scope on what we're talking about there.
Go ahead.
First off, I think that's a great compromise. I think that would work quite nicely. I don't think there's a need for a report if
Councillor
there's an
Riley, you're
appetite.
asking for something as an individual, not something that's been discussed amongst council. We have had two very comprehensive reports. I think the idea that each individual council might like to have, a presentation to gain a better understanding before we go too much further in asking for reports to be prepared for a council that isn't in existence yet.
No, I realize that, and that's why I'm retracting my request for that. I'm merely suggesting that.
I see relief on somebody's face.
Not mine. I'm thrilled for all the reports.
No, I don't think a report's going to be necessary, so I'm going to withdraw the request for a report. But I am supporting your suggestion on what we could do for getting the information out there. That's all I'm doing.
Any other questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to proceed, or did you have a comment, Mr. CEO? Question? Okay, so moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Carter. And thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you very much, Council.
Council receives a report, the information report establishing municipal service corporations for communal services and information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So next up under planning is a minor amendment to draft approval plan of subdivision in the municipality of Dysart. Good morning, Mrs. Purcell. Still morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Deputy Warden Danielson. Apologies. Shrink it. Perfect. Okay. I will try to keep this presentation brief. The subject lands are located on the west side of the Haliburton settlement area with frontage on Mallard Road. As council may recall, this development was draft approved in April of this year. Since then, the applicants have proposed a minor amendment to this draft approved plan consisting of adding a narrow strip of land at the south end of the development from lands they own to the south to the subdivision. My apologies. The proposal is truly minor in nature and has no impact from a county policy perspective. The purpose of it is to capture the private road in its entirety within the subdivision rather than having it half in and half out and relying on reciprocal easements for access. The amendment does not materially alter the approved lot or block structure, road network, servicing approach, or overall development pattern. It was circulated to Dysart for comment, and Dysart staff have no concerns. And as a result, staff are recommending that the application be approved. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time. The applicant's agent is on the line if there are any questions that I cannot answer, to defer to them. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, then could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and approve the amendment? Councillor Dayu, Councillor McKechnie.
The staff report PLN 07-2026 minor amendment to draft approved plan of subdivision file 46T 23001 and plan of condominium file 46 CE 23002. Municipality of Dysart all be received, and further that the amendment to the draft plan of subdivision and plan of condominium be approved as detailed in Schedule A to the attached report.
All in favor? That's carried. Sorry about that. Next up is your planning department work plan update.
Thank you. I have a few items in the report I'd like to verbally update council on. Our land division activity got off to a slow start this year, but applications are picking up and look to still be on track to previous year's numbers. With the arrival of spring, bylaw matters, both on the shoreline front, but also in relation to our tree cutting bylaw, have seen a recent uptick in activity that is not yet captured in the stats, but will in my next update. Still very manageable, so that's good, and nothing very concerning coming about from that activity. In terms of policy and programming, as approved in the 2026 budget, the contract with ULinks to carry on the water quality testing program has been executed, and the 2026 program is underway. My intent moving forward is that Jim and Andy from ULinks bring more frequent updates to council, and that after this year's collection program, we start to look at potential trends in the data that has been collected over the years and see if there's any indications of positive trends or negative trends, and if there's anything we can do from a policy perspective to reinforce those positive trends or combat the negative trends, since our water bodies are so integral to our economy and our identity. Another item I wanted to highlight is the proposed PPS conformity official plan amendment. Since the publishing of the report, we've had the opportunity to meet with ministry staff to discuss a proposed approach to progress through the conformity OPA, as it's a legislative requirement that MMH approves any conformity amendment. They advise that they require us to circulate a draft for their review, which they assign a 3-month timeline to. That time is in addition to all the Planning Act statutory timelines for notice, public meeting, and the appeal period. It was intended that some housekeeping items be wrapped into the OPA as well. But given the extended timelines we're going to experience with the conformity OPA, we have pivoted and are now proposing to do 2 separate OPAs to council, a housekeeping OPA, and then follow up with the proposed PPS conformity OPA. So while we're working on the conformity OPA, we'll be bringing a separate housekeeping amendment for council's consideration as a first draft in June. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, comments? Councillor Dayu?
Thank you very much. It's been a while since we've chatted about climate change, and I just wonder, between now and the end of the term, do you anticipate an update on the mitigation plan or on the adaptation plan? We've had some major events in the last few years that, could add value to what's in the plan. And so what are your thoughts between now and the end of the term on those two plans? Or three really, but the corporates in particular, because our community committee hasn't been active in the last little while. So really it's the two corporate plans.
Sure. Through you, Deputy Warden. I have done a comprehensive review of the plans, and a lot of the measures that are established in the plans are really wrapped into other departments' operations, which have been ongoing, but absolutely appreciate that perhaps it's time to bring a report that comprehensively goes through everything that we've collectively been doing over the last couple of years. So I can absolutely bring that in June for council.
Thanks for raising that, because that's one of the questions that I wanted to bring. I've heard from a number of local residents that they can't see anything that's actually happening with respect to climate change, or what the county is doing with respect to climate change. So we look forward to receiving that report.
Absolutely.
Any other questions on the planning update? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive it? Councillor Shell, Councillor Dayu.
The staff report PLN 08/2026 planning department work plan update be received as information.
All in favor? That's carried. We have nothing under economic development. So next is information technology and a responsible AI use framework. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Deputy Warden Danielson and members of council. So before you today is a report and on a responsible artificial intelligence use framework, as well as that said framework. If council may recall, about 18 months ago, I actually brought a report to council on some Ontario legislation that was being proposed, Bill 194, the Enhancing Digital Trust and Security Act. That has since been passed, and that legislation basically gives the applicable Ontario Ministry the ability to issue directives towards the broader public sector, including municipalities, on things like cybersecurity, and also on artificial intelligence usage in the broader public sector. So while we are still waiting for a lot of those directives to come, the ones that we're expecting to affect municipalities, we did some work to kind of get ourselves in a better situation for what's expected to come down. So the county, working through what's called the Eastern Ontario IT Collaborative, which is a group of IT managers and directors that we get together periodically, we both saw this as a shared challenge. So the group of us worked together with a third party, and we produced the AI use framework that was provided to you today. So the AI framework lays out basically what I think a practical plan for implementing ethical and risk-aware AI usage within the county. We are currently taking this and using this as a foundational document, working on an AI policy, both at the county and our member municipalities, as well as a risk use framework, because as per what we believe is going to come down through the directives, we need to have an AI use risk registry in place and be able to inform our public about, when they're interacting with AI. And just so that we have all that information, we'll be building out, again, the risk management process and an AI risk use process. We've developed some in-house AI literacy training that we've given to county staff, and we're working at providing that same thing again to our municipal partners. So really what I'm here today is asking just for council's endorsement of the framework as that foundational document, and to answer any questions that council may have about this document or anything AI related that hopefully I can answer.
Thanks, Mike. Questions, comments? Councillor Fury.
Yeah, Mike's interesting. I don't know whether anybody there wants to comment on it, but China, for instance, a lot of European countries are passing laws to say that AI can't replace jobs. I just wonder what the thought of that is, because in some places already in Ontario, it's put 10 people out of work. So I think it's a serious issue, and it's going to have implications really wide, maybe not in the municipal sector, but certainly in the private sector. So just a thought of what's going on that we're not apparently concerned about.
I think Mr. CAO has something to
Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Deputy Warden Danielson, through to Councillor Fury. Yeah, those type of things are what we're working on and finding our way through the world of AI as we integrate it into our operations like everybody else. Yes. Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. What I was going to say is that as we move forward with the integration of AI into what we do as an operational standpoint of the county, that information will be brought forward to county council for as discussion areas or information areas, and that would be identified as the purpose of it and what the end result of it would be. So those type of things would be part of our ongoing process as we familiarize ourselves with it and modernize into the new technology. But it's a point that's well taken and something we are looking at.
Other comments or questions? Scary world we're entering into. Councillor Dayu?
Thanks very much for the report. Just a request for your observation in general. I see AI as being something that we can actively buy into as a tool or not. But there's also the sort of AI that happens to us. Sometimes you do an update on a program that you've bought a 10-year contract for, and oh, there's an AI button there, and you've not chosen it. You've not asked for it. The company has just decided that it's going to provide this service, and we haven't actually asked for it. So do you have any comments on that? How does one govern the use of AI that happens to us rather than a purposeful decision on our part?
Yeah, if I may, through the deputy warden, no, for sure. So what we've noticed and what we'll continue to notice is AI is getting baked into all the normal tools that we use, right? AI is the buzzword. It's the big thing in technology right now. Every time we go to buy a new platform or get an update, then AI is baked in. So for sure, it is going to prove a bit of a challenge in terms of the governance. If there's opportunities where we can opt out because the use of the AI for a certain use case proves to be riskier than what the organization will accept, then that's a potential, but it's going to get a little trickier where there is no opportunity to opt out. So we'll really have to take a look at and be better informed about how AI is being incorporated into the tools, and then which data, how they're using the data that we're using within those tools, if they conform to generally to what we consider our IT security framework, or, do we say, okay, well, this is a tool we can no longer use because their implementation of AI is just unacceptable to us. This is going to be an evolution, because again, it's and we've struggled with it at the SMT table. It's such a new industry and things are changing constantly, even for, the world of technology, where things change week over week, month over month. It seems to be even changing even quicker than that. So to answer your question, then it'll be a challenge.
Other questions or comments? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and approve the recommendations included? Councillor Carter, Councillor McKechnie.
The council accept the EOICTC responsible AI framework as a guiding document for the responsible use of artificial intelligence within the organization, and further, the council endorses the framework as a foundational source of information to support the development and implementation of the county's AI governance program.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. But just thinking of the length of time that I've been on council and the changes that you've had to deal with over that period of time are extraordinary. Keep up the good work. Next up is EMS. And your first topic is building reassessments. I should say first scary topic.
Good morning, Deputy Warden Danielson and members of council. So I bring forward to you today two separate reports. The first report is an assessment on the Haliburton base and the Torrey Hill base that was conducted through last summer, and a final report was presented in the fall from Aegis Group. Aegis Group was selected on the basis of Sylvain Cloutier, who had dealt with them for some other building assessments within the county. So this was a visual assessment only of the infrastructure of the buildings. And then they've made some recommendations. Good news, they didn't find anything that was of immediate life threat to the health and safety of the staff in the building, so there was no need to shut anything down. However, they did find several deficiencies within the building, which is included in the reports that I provided. A couple of points that I'd like to touch on about it. It looks at the next 20 years, but there are some immediate needs that need to be addressed, in including the designated substance assessment that should be done. There is no immediate concerns of anything like asbestos or anything found during the assessment. However, having that on record to ensure we're meeting standards is recommended. And then they recommend to develop an operation and maintenance policy. I am working with Director Sylvain Cloutier through that. We're meeting together to try to figure out a bit of a plan on how we want to move that forward. In the meantime, we do seem to be running into, regular maintenance issues that are occurring. For example, at the Haliburton base, we've had a number of pipes that suddenly have decided they want to leak, and that so they come repair, and then a week later we've brought them back in to repair a new section of pipe. So there's interesting facets that are happening within the base. We recently had to replace one of the motors on the garage due to the age, and it just gave out. So these are not necessarily insignificant costs that we're experiencing before we're even at the point where making a decision on what we want to do with the bases overall. So as you can see, there's roughly about a $500,000 need in the short term just to maintain the buildings in a sort of state of good repair. That doesn't really include any sort of the ongoing costs that are going on. So pretty significant amount of money for the Haliburton base in that case. Torrey Hill base was found to be inadequate for size. There's only one washroom, and I think and it is a recommendation from Occupational Health and Safety is a minimum of 2 washrooms, depending on staffing levels, in which Torrey Hill base does meet the staffing levels where it should require 2 washrooms in there. The water goes through a water system. The water itself is not potable due to radon and uranium levels, but the system that is set up in place does eliminate the uranium from the water. But there's only one one tap that can be used to actually drink out of. So we do supply drinking water there. And we recently did some radon testing in the base, and the levels were above the recommended levels. And they recommend, based on that, remediation to take place within Torrey Hill base. So we're working on that. It's within a year is what the radon, sorry, forgive me there, I forget the name, but basically the radon through Health Canada and Public Health recommends doing remediation within a year. So we're working on that process. And then you saw that the visual inspection is looking at about $150,000 in repairs, again, to maintain. And with that, we recently had to replace the furnace at Torrey Hill base, which was only 14 years old because the heat exchanger cracked and was now a safety risk. So that was replaced immediately once that was discovered by our HVAC technician. So I'll take any questions.
Although this is not related to either Torrey Hill or the Haliburton bases, I know that there was work being done at some point in the past at looking at what we might do to establish a base or a greater presence in the northern part of the county. Do you have any insights or any comments that you could make with respect to where that stands?
So I know there was a report that was done in the master plan. When I arrived, we did do a bit of a further assessment. I have some recommendations of where the base would be most effective. I think it's trying to balance now. What are we looking at for the needs for all of our bases, and including a location in the in Algonquin Highlands area. So all kind of pieces that I think we need to put everything together and really sit down and look at.
Thank you. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Deputy Warden Danielson. Just to augment what Chief Slatter has brought forward. So similar to kind of the conversation we had this morning with the auditor about our go forward pieces, a number of the issues, or if not a number, all of the issues identified by Chief Slatter this morning are what we would determine as unfunded liabilities for the county. And so in discussing them with the chief going forward, this is just to put it on council's radar going forward, and there will be a more detailed report coming in as we get into the budget cycle into 2027, but also start identifying and prioritize issues that we think we need to do in 26, and how that would be funded, and more importantly, how we're going to do the longer term funding on an aggregate basis for our base. It's awkward, but anyways, and so I think that this is just kind of the first of a series of reports that you'll receive coming forward on the state of the facilities for the paramedic services.
Questions, Councillor Rail, then Councillor Carter. Oh, and then if you wouldn't mind, go first to Councillor Ferry. Put it up to the mic.
With the Albert base there, I just want to tell you, property you need on South Street or whatever to hook into the one by the fire hall, would be happy to help you with there, because you got to get the water away from the building. There's something we can work with you there on. We're happy to do it.
No, that's great. And I think that question came up. We're not sure where the water's draining to right now, even from inside the garage area or the yeah. So I think that's a piece I need to find out.
Thanks, Councillor Ferry. Councillor Rail.
Yeah, in regards to the radon, Lakeland Public Health now has recognized that as one of the biggest areas in the new Lakeland Public Health region. And so there's now actually quite an investigative group together at the health unit looking into radon, what can be done remedially, how it works. It's something like even like a radon water goes through various types of movement when it's underground, and of course radon follows it. Have you had an opportunity, or have you considered talking with them over how some of this stuff can be dealt with? I'm asking for two reasons. One, they may be of benefit to you, but on the other hand, you may also be of benefit to them, because the more they know about the challenges that are being running into with relation to radon, especially in an area like most of Highlands East on that side, that is exposed to radon and has to deal with it, or should be dealing with it, the most beneficial it would be for both groups. So I didn't know if you've had a chance to talk to them, and if you haven't, I wondered if you would want to.
Yeah. So we did obtain the testers from public health, so they're aware that we're into the program that they've developed. So they don't do the results piece, so that comes from a different agency and their recommendations. So yeah, we worked with public health to get the testers into the base, tested them for the I think a little 3 to 4 months, and then sent them in for the analysis and the report that was provided. And then there's follow-up from them just saying, here's where you're at. So, and reported through that structure.
Thank you.
Counselor Carter.
So I note that there's no immediate threat to, of death, through any of our employees is a pretty low bar. But I'm just wondering, since you've done these visual inspections, obviously, like you said, you don't know what's in behind, this. Before we do an awful lot of these, I don't know, quick fixes, or if we should do a little bit more study, because you may be in a position where you cannot save the building, or it's not a building that you can continue to occupy. For instance, if there is asbestos or various types of foams or whatever else that were used, that you may not want to be able to continue to use it. And, in what Warden Danielson has said, if you're going to have to change buildings, or this would maybe a time to look at exactly where you should be set up, because, not to want to take anything away from anybody, but, the locations in Torrey Hill or Haliburton or in wherever, may not be the best optimal place for where you want to be in the future. I mean, we're making a decision here for 20 years. It's not, it's something that we should take a really good look at. And I would hope that in the next little while, one of the first things we would do was, get in the people to do real assessments on these buildings.
Yeah, and so I've had further conversation with the Aegis Group, and they can come in to do that. So wanted to present this to council first, so that you have an understanding of where we're going.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Warden Danielson. Again, to build on Chief Slider's comments and to your comment, Councillor Carter, this is a position we're in now, as we're balancing out and prioritizing them, because they're notwithstanding. I think there's a general understanding we need new in certain areas, but we have to bridge from the currency to the new. And so that will be part of the next round of information that comes back to council, is that, yes, there's this work, notwithstanding the fact we are looking to do something different. But to keep the buildings operational until that point comes into play, we're going to have to do some short-term investment to allow that to happen.
Go ahead.
It's just that, the numbers we're talking about, even in the short term, are still high.
Yeah.
So the question is that, is it worth sort of getting ahead of the curve to know, like some of them may not necessarily be necessary if you're going to have to abandon the locations.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's that's the position we're in now, is making that determination, because it's going to land somewhere in the middle. There's some we're going to have to spend now, but right. And that's to your point, the greater depth of analysis will help us on that front.
Councillor McKechnie.
Yeah, so you're talking maybe someday building a new building other than in Dysart.
No, I don't think any decision's been made there.
I just want to let you know that there's
Yeah.
a lot of property over here that, whenever you want to expand and things like that. And I'm sure Dysart would work along with any needs that you would need there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, no, we're,
I mean, it's so like Highlands East, Minden, we're all
Yeah.
we're connected pretty close. I think the location is definitely, I know it's maybe not the time to talk about it, but I just want you to be very aware that Dysart's aware of it.
yeah. 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 No, I think my experience is that everyone's aware of it, and certainly the, I'm surprised someone hasn't driven over the side of the hill as they come out one day from this building, because it is so narrow, but especially with when the snow gets piled up and you can lose your bearings. But no, absolutely, we're considering all of our key locations and where to best be situated.
Any other comments or questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive Chief Slatter's report? Councillor Dayu, Councillor McKechnie.
That council accepts the EGS group building condition assessment as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is your year-end report for 2025.
Yeah, thank you. So presenting year-end report from 2025. This this kind of time of year is important for, well, all year is important for paramedics, but we just had First Responders Day on May the 1st, and certainly want to thank Haliburton County Council for their support of all the first responders within the county and for supporting First Responders Day. It was a very successful day. We had great turnout across the entire county at all of our displays that were set up, and the public was very thankful to be able to visit us and support. So thank you for Sue Tiffin and Alicia Payne for putting that together, but for the continued support of County Council. Next week starts Paramedic Services Week, and the theme for this year is that better care starts here. So we have highly trusted paramedics who deliver expert, compassionate care in protecting our communities, and we look forward to next week and again further promoting what paramedic services do for the communities. First part of the report is some changeover in leadership. So I started in February of last year in the role of the chief position, and then we had some changeover at the deputy chief position as well, where Chris Parrish, who had been a commander, was promoted into our deputy chief of operations position, and Wade McPherson was an external candidate who came in initially in operations and then moved over to a professional standards role. And as well, we have our first frontline supervisory staff commanders who started beginning of December and were out on the road supporting the frontline staff in mid-December. And I got to say that the staff, the commanders have been well received by not only the frontline paramedic staff, but the allied agencies that we're working with. The support there has been incredible, and I've personally never had a situation where paramedics are asking when the commander isn't on where they are and why they aren't working that day. So they're truly enjoying the support, and we're looking to keep that going. As we get into our response times, the response times are determined by council, set every year. And the numbers are flexible. They can be set how we want based on recommendations. I wouldn't recommend changing anything at this point in time. We did meet our response times for all the categories except for our CTAS 1. CTAS 1 is concerning because they are the most, other than sudden cardiac arrest, they're our most acutely ill patients. I did do a review as to why we maybe didn't meet those targets. And really it's the distance that we're traveling. You can see I did include a chart about CTAS 1 where our average call time was, or response time was greater than 15 minutes for the majority. We had 1 month where we were kind of 4 minutes, and that's just location and where we were at the time of the call. The majority of the calls were traveling great distances to get to. So that would explain the why we didn't meet the standard, but it still is concerning that we're not able to get to the citizens that we serve in a more timely fashion. With that being said, the province is looking at a new response time standard where they want to move it to. Right now, the standard is based on an 8-minute response time, which meets an urban setting, but not the rural setting. So they're looking to change the response time standard to an urban, rural, and remote. Haliburton County would fall within the rural section in which the standards are going to be adjusted and reflect more what actually happens in those. So there's more to come on that. The work is happening. I am part of that working group with the province. The election is they want to wait till after the election to bring the official change forward so that people aren't trying to make those decisions, during an election period, because we have to decide those in the fall of every year. Our call volume is down about 4%, which is good, and mostly attributed to the fact that the CT scanner, which I reported on the previous month. So 4% is good. Without, I did run some numbers. If we had to kind of maintained our current status quo, we would probably be up 26% overall from 2020. Instead, we're up about 20%. So there is some reduction there in call volume, but it shows that our overall call volume within the community continues to increase, and the use of paramedic services, it continues to increase. You'll see in 2025, the number of calls is a bit of an estimate. We know how many patient contacts we had, but we don't know officially how many what we call standby. So when Minden goes out, we move a vehicle over to Minden to cover there. The ministry stopped tracking that when we moved to the new dispatch system. The chiefs across the province we've all pushed back on that. So they've reinstated that recently. So we lost that data piece for the year. So it is a bit of a guesstimate based on traditional numbers as to what that looks like. As I mentioned, the medical priority dispatch system started, so we are seeing a decrease in what we call the lights and sirens, life-threatening calls that are being sent out. So where we were at 75% of our call volume, it's now about 43% in that, and that was an expected change with the with moving to that. I want to highlight that the paramedics who work for Haliburton County Paramedic Service are a fantastic group. They are engaged, they're passionate, they are empathetic. Sorry.
Take a breath.
So we don't have the highest call volume in the world for Haliburton County, but we do have a long time that we spend on calls and a long time with patients. In the data, so this year we had 2 saves from cardiac arrest, which is, I think, a really huge highlight. Given the geography of the area and the response times, the save is very rare in this community. And sorry. So to have that happen is truly special, and we're looking to honor the medics involved next week during Paramedic Services Week. So other programs, we continue with our STEMI, so people having a heart attack going directly to Peterborough is still an important program. Stroke patients. So we do a number of those every year, and having the resource, yes, we have to go to Peterborough for STEMI. We go to Peterborough or Huntsville for stroke. They do take the vehicles out of the community for a long period of time, but it's best. There is what is best for the patients, and then our ongoing continuing medical education, where we're adding more and more skills and treatments available to the paramedics to provide to the community. all of this does take a toll on the mental health of the paramedics. They face these things quite willingly and courageously. We have a number of supports in place, you know, through our EFAP program, but also through you know, Wounded Warriors Canada. There's Warrior Health Now, Boots on the Ground, and some of these are some agencies that we can reach out to for peer support. Recently at a meeting last week, WSIB announced some changes for first responders in their programming to be able to make determinations faster so that we can get people into the right treatment program quicker to ideally get them either back to work, but into a place where their mental health can be improved. And then just the teamwork. We work, you know, we have our communication specialists, obviously the hospital, the nurses, physicians, fire, the police, the park wardens, other public responders who assist us to help deliver the care. You'll see, you know, Orange come in on occasion, or quite a bit in this area, to assist. And then obviously during the ice storm, we had lots of response from our neighboring paramedics in Eastern Ontario to assist us. And the last part, just talking about community paramedicine. I know I gave a report recently. So since that report, there's been a change. The province has announced that community paramedic funding is moving from long-term care into the Ministry of Health, our Emergency Health Services branch. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. It came out of the blue for everybody. No one was aware of that was going to happen. So we are working. I was at the EOWC Advocacy Day at Queen's Park on Monday, and was able to talk about the need that you know, the sustainability of community paramedicine and the ability to increase the funding for community paramedicine. Everyone we spoke to absolutely loves the community paramedic program. It is impactful and effective for the province. Thank you. And I'll take any questions.
Well, thank you for your report. And we can see how much you care about the service that you provide. And I mean, I have had some experience this year that has been a little bit different in my life, but I can honestly say on behalf of myself, and I'm quite sure that all of County Council agree, that we can't say enough about the skilled and caring service that your team provides. So, you know, it's much appreciated. We have a proclamation to speak to that, but, you know, personally, I can't say enough about the work that you all do.
Thank you.
So could I have a mover and a seconder? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Carter.
Sorry, I have not had to have the personal experience of your group, which I am thankful for. I will say that if you need a place to station a vehicle, the end of my driveway is always available to you. But I would like to note that, you know, particularly in Minden Hills, through the ice storm and through our state of emergency this time, all departments across the county help. You guys were there at every meeting that we had, and you remained flexible when roads and bridges were washed out or closed, and you know, and I've had lots of opportunity to meet with more of your staff who were stationed at the evacuation centers and so on. And I just want to basically say that, you know, we thank you an awful lot, and I can concur with everything that you said about your group.
Thank you.
Councillor Rail?
Yes, I've had the opportunity of speaking to a couple of people who unfortunately had to use your services, and I'm only using that because of the circumstance they were in. But the feedback I got was phenomenal. It was, it wasn't just the way that the patient was dealt with, It was how the peripheral people were dealt with. Because it's not just the person when you go there that's physically hurt that has the challenge. It's also the people that are surrounding them, depending on the thing. And all I got back was wow, and wow in multiple ways of being defined. So I think your point about your staff is absolutely correct, but I think it should go beyond that. I think staff takes its overall emotional and commitment from its leader. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McKechnie.
This might be not the time and place, Liz, but that day, unfortunate day for you over there in Wilberforce. There were two gentlemen there, ex ambulance employees that retired, and they were in the audience, and they respond. I witnessed it. I could see the one gentleman's face, but I just it might have gone blank on his name. But the other guy, one guy's name was Larry Harton, I believe. And then by the time your guys got there, I mean, they were doing everything so professional, and you can tell that. And they hadn't been they hadn't had their uniform on for a long time, but they sure responded quickly. And I don't think anybody's ever acknowledged it. And I just thought about it because I had, very good view that day, and they really did respond. And the whole thing worked so great as a team, and that was so very positive to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, a lot of people stepped up that day, and it was good to see.
And here I am. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the year-end report? Councillor McKechnie, Councillor Carter.
That the 2025 County Haliburton Paramedic Services year-end report be received as information.
All in favor? That's carried. We have a proclamation, because of the upcoming Paramedics Week. Do we have a mover and a seconder? How do proclamations work?
We need a mover and a seconder.
A mover and a seconder for that proclamation. Councillors Shell and Councillor Dayu.
Whereas paramedics are highly trained clinicians who assess, diagnose, and treat patients in dynamic and often unpredictable environments, and whereas paramedics deliver timely, evidence-informed, and compassionate care across Ontario, and whereas paramedics improve the quality of life of all Ontarians when and where it matters most, and whereas paramedics strengthen community health, reduce system strain, and protect those who need it most, and whereas each year in May, National Paramedic Services Week celebrates the caring professional paramedics in Canada. Now, therefore be resolved that I, Deputy Warden Liz Danielson, on behalf of the Haliburton County Council, do hereby proclaim May 17th to 23rd, 2026 be Paramedic Services Week in Haliburton County.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Do we have one to read?
No.
Okay, we'll carry on. Next up, are there any notices of motion? Hearing none, we have no correspondence listing. Next is are the bylaws or a bylaw. Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the bylaw? Councillor Dayu, Councillor Carter.
And bylaw 4345 being a bylaw to authorize an agreement with KB Civil Constructors, Inc. for the rehabilitation of the West Guilford Bridge be considered to be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
All in favor? That's carried. Could I then have a mover and a seconder to move into closed session? Councillor Carter, Councillor Royale.
That in accordance with Miss Black Section 239 sub B, the Haliburton County Council enter into closed session for following reasons: be the personnel matters about an identified individual, including municipal and local board employees.
All in favor? That's carried. We'll call the meeting back to order. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Councillor Carter, Councillor Rail,
That bylaw 4346 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the county council meeting be considered to be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
all in favor? That's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn. Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Dayou.
That the meeting, that the May 13th meeting, Haliburton County Council be adjourned at 12:41.